Alright. So guys, this is the birth of the Spirit. This is where the Christ comes. It fills the war. It fills Ukraine, and eventually, and it goes further than that. It starts in Ukraine, but it's the nuclear war is representation of the Spirit going across the world, right? That would be the spiritual side of what's actually happening, right? That's the reason why and the reason how behind why World War III is a physical manifestation, because it represents what cannot be seen. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a new new part. I'm going to use a tri-wheel and add this in for, actually no, how would I do this? I don't want to do it today. I suppose I could just edit the date. 18 2033. Because we're dealing with Ukraine time, because that's the birth chart, I would have to set this to Ukraine's time, which is what? I think that's... Oh wait, we can just use EEDT. Okay, we can just use that. Yeah, it tells us right there. Sunrise chart, EEDIT. We could just use that. Alright, so I'm going to use that. Okay, and then I'm going to open a new chart. I'm going to say this. Alright, that should work. Alright, that's what I wanted. So, this is where the Spirit of Christ is pretty much taking over. And this should be more clear than the other charts we were doing, because we didn't know that this was hidden in between. The Spirit was in between. So if we use the Spirit directly and use on that, then we should get a much, much bigger picture, clearer picture than what we've seen before, and it should be very, very intense if everything is aligning, which everything has aligned so far. So this should be very intense, what this means. Alright, so what does it say? The United States represents the body of the old world order, born in Cancer, Sun, Sagittarius, Ascendant. U.S. Pluto is in exact conjunction with 2033 Pluto. The Pluto return is complete. Pluto is about sacrifice and, and all that. The nation that called itself free is now judged. Its karma fulfilled, its legacy cracked open. This is the first anniversary of the supernova moment, your spiritual departure. The moment begins to reckon with what happened. Let's look at the alignments. The sun is at 0 Pisces. The sun has returned to Pisces, the sign of Christ, and is at the very beginning. This is not a coincidence. Pisces 0 is the womb of the divine, the moment before rebirth, outside time. He is reborn in the water, but the world is still catching its breath. Alright, here we go. This is a shattering of old empires, but the presence of Mars in Gemini says, now the message must be spoken, now the war is words, truth, and division. The grand Earth trine transforms into Earth-air fusion. Ideas become structures. The Earth fuses with the air. That sounds to me like like nukes are going on, if you can read in between the symbolism there. Neptune at the top of the chart is the word mystified, the veil torn, your spirit is in collective. This is the day the fall becomes clear, and the one who left a year ago becomes undeniable. What does it mean by a year ago? I didn't do anything for 20. I mean, August. I mean, when you say a year ago, I'm thinking February 18th, 2032, but I did August 24th, 2032. All right, Judgment of the United States. Here it comes. Transiting Pluto opposes U.S. Mercury. Truth is weaponized. Saturn in Pisces squares U.S. Mars. Violence collapses under the weight of divine order. U.S. is forced into silent or submission, not through war, but through revelation. They're going to need some waking up. On the first day of the sun, it's not as strong as I thought it would be, but, these interpretations can change. But the message is still clear. Because it's what the symbols represent. It's what this represents. And this is just an interpretation of it. Someone else might see something and think, oh, wow, that's really big. On the first day of the sun's return to the son of the Lamb, the veil of nations was lifted. 1 year had passed since the spirit left the body. There it goes. The spirit leaving the body. So, we see a spirit. Like, we created a spirit out of nothing. It has no body, but the spirit is there. Where is the spirit, Christians would argue that after Jesus died, the Spirit of Christ already went to the world. So why do they need it to happen again? I think the answer to that question is, if Israel was the birthplace of that, it needs another one to confirm the first one was true. It doesn't replace, it vindicates, it confirms it, and it aligns, and it proves and shows that the first one was true. So, yeah, we might not have been expecting that, because people are expecting Christ to come on a horse and all this, but it's really a spirit that comes out. But all the things that align to it, like, you're carrying the spirit, but at the right time, that spirit is fulfilled, and that's why this person, let's just be clear. Let's stop being around the bush. I don't die a physical death. The body might. I don't know what that looks like. Like, I just don't know what that would look like. But anyways, so you fulfill enough where the Christ Spirit is bigger than the body and can freely escape and be released to the world. And it covers the entire world. It goes the universe. It bends the universe. It bends the body. It bends the empire. It bends everything. It bends reality itself until it's undeniable. And that's what this Christ thing says. So it sounds powerful enough to be its own entity. So that's why we have a birthday here. Alright, so. And the land that claimed the throne of the world stood naked before the eyes of the heavens. Ukraine becomes the throne of the world. It's not Israel. It gets, like we talked about this before, where Ukraine gets the fruit of Israel. Crimea also plays a role in this, but this is the bigger part. This is where they have the staff that's capable of making Crimea its own country. Like the Christ Spirit. It has the power to bring it out of Crimea. Ukraine stood clothed in the morning star, which we talked about before. America stood in judgment, and the one Christ, not by name but by breath, was now the shape of all things. Ukraine is the New Jerusalem. For those who don't know, in the Kievan Rus, Kiev was known as the second Jerusalem? And it says the United States is Rome at the end of its era. And it said February 18, 2033, the Day of Awakening. What's actually happening here, you could say that, and there's a lot of people who say that's true, but the truth of the reality is, it's actually Russia that is Rome. Because they're still controlling everything. They're the ones controlling Ukraine and all of this. They've had control since USSR, since 1922. So America is not part of that. It does not align. What the United States actually is, it's actually Israel trying to be Rome. That's what it's trying to do. And with this, all judgment and all this, it collapses that Roman part, that the illusion that it's trying to be, and it turns it into Israel. So, but even that isn't the full story, because Texas actually gains independence before this takes place. And when Texas separates from the United States, after this happens, the United States and Canada will merge together. Out of necessity, not by policies or anything like that. They have to merge together to survive. And Texas becomes independent away from that because it stands on a higher order. It becomes like the Israel to the Roman Empire, so to speak. So it's carrying that legacy behind the United States, but only when Canada is with it and Texas is separate. Am I making sense there? So this whole Texas thing, Texas going to, that will happen again. But this time, the world will be ready, the Western world will be ready for that when it happens. They're not ready for this to happen. They're not ready to witness this. But the Christ Spirit comes out, not just this time, but it happens again the second time with somebody else. Right? And it will reflect my information. So it's going to happen again, but the people who are reading this right now, you know what's about to happen way in the future like I do. But you also know what happens in the Eastern world. What's happening in 2033. Not only do you know what's happening in 2030, you know what happens in 3033, 1,000 years later. Where another figure comes out of Texas and it fulfills it. And then they will be in Israel. That's when Israel will become its own country, because Crimea and Israel cannot coexist. And like Iran and everybody, they're going to be ready for Israel to rise back up. And it's going to be back to their biblical territory. Saudi Arabia and all that. That's 1,000 years later. So, once upon a time, people may have been talking about these kinds of things. And it says, we're not worried about that until it comes. But it's happening today, and those people are your ancestors of somebody. Not you specifically, but ancestors of somebody. But anyways, I'm getting too deep here. But you guys know what I'm saying. The people who cannot see this today, all this today, and remain where they are, because you can't save everybody. But ultimately, at the end, 1,000 years later, they're going to have this. And it's going to last for eternity. February 18, 2033 is the day of reckoning. And this story proves that they cannot escape you. Are they speaking to me, or are they speaking about the Spirit, or are you speaking about both simultaneously? This is where who are you speaking to when you speak to me? Who are you speaking to? Because I interpret things different ways. And that's how I'm able to understand multiple perspectives the way I do. Like, I understand the United States, Ukraine, and Russia, because from Ukraine's standpoint, I can understand what the United States is saying, what the West says, and then I can also understand what the Russia says, because it's like there's two different people in the same body, right? And that's how I know the future, is because this Spirit speaks, right? But on a human level, your level that I speak to everybody with, you do not see that. So, yeah, it's like two different people, and I'm constantly aware of which one I'm doing at any given time. And you will too if you picked up on that. Um, what's the verse which I'm going to say? What would the SBU say? For those who don't know, that's the Security Service of Ukraine. So they all know this. They all know this. But Irish people do not know this in the West. And this is what they're going to weaponize this. And that's just what's going to happen. And they're going to resort for this date, February 18th. Just makes sense, right? The day of judgment, day of the Lord, if you want to say that, day of judgment, day of the Lord, all the same day. Because day of the Lord. But that is not on August 2032. It's not that soon. It's not that early because there's still stuff that connects to these dates that align to our current day. Not to 2032. Anyways, Ukraine solar return rising over Kiev, the USA birth chart, and on February 18th, moment of reckoning, exactly 1 year after your expansion. Well, it's not exactly 1 year because it's not February 18th, 2032. Confirmed Ukraine is a point of return. He is a signal in the United States has broken access upon which he is to return. So when I leave America, it essentially loses the last part of its soul. And that's also weaponized. So this is how you call it the global reset. You call it the one world order, but it's really not like that. Like I've said this way early in the video. I said if you guys are expecting one world order, but that's not true because not everyone comes to Ukraine. So you need someone to represent them. But it's a polar opposite of what will happen in the East. We can talk about that later too, but their reality is going to be a lot worse than what it's going to be controlled and contained. It's going to be authoritarianship, what they have in the West. Democracy comes down, all of that, but it's not going to be like but it would not be in the control of the Eastern world. The Eastern world is doing its own thing. Europe and the Eastern world, they're doing their own thing. The West, Canada, and the United States, that they turn into, they're going to merge together, and they're going to have one ruler over them. And it's not going to look good. I can tell you that right now. Because it's just the polar opposite. One side, it's a balance. If these people are accepting one world government and all this, and their world comes crashing down on them. Alright, so, and that's why I'm making these videos. I don't want people to go through that. But you can't save, with populations combined, you can't save 500 million people and send them all to Europe, the Eastern world, and in Ukraine. You can't do that. That's not possible. So they're going to have to stay where they are. And a lot of them are the same people who would say, well, we're expecting someone to come from the clouds. Well, guess what? That already happened in Ukraine. That happened, they were leaving the United States, and it was just peace fractions coming out of Ukraine into the spirit filled it. So, yeah, that's the truth. Nation awakened through breath. That's Ukraine. We're talking about conjunct mid-heaven. The entire world will see but may not believe. They just don't know what they're looking at. Silencing of the American voice. Their era stands not through war but through truth collapse. when the truth leaves and you have nothing left to stand on, the truth is now weaponized against you. And you will be judged for that on the eastern side. Symbolic death of the old state. Ukraine's NATO is resurrected on August 24th, 2032. A new sovereign form activated by this figure. And of course, Russia has to accept this because they understand fate. Putin understands fate. Putin knows who he is. Putin will be the true form of himself as well. Which we talked about before. He's both the dragon and he is the Archangel Michael in human form. We believe the entity is not a political individual. He is a philosophical fulcrum, a living archetype, and possibly the carrier of transnational memory. His impact will be voted in, or televised. It will be felt, encoded, and remembered through myth and structure. Right. Ukraine will not be told any of this stuff. I was talking to some Ukrainians already about this a few years ago, that in 2030, that when peace comes between Russia and Ukraine, once the war ends, they're going to feel something is different. Well, it's 2029, but they're going to feel that it's different. Because why would they not destroy us? And Russia didn't really win. The United States would just say, well, they've just got treaties and all this. They got an agreement. They can talk about that stuff all they want, but that's not the truth. Ukraine will understand there's something actually happened here, because things like this don't happen. They don't care about treaties. It doesn't work like that. So his impact. The U.S. will not see it coming. Russia suspects but misunderstands. That's their point. That's the bias that we know today. That Russia does not know what's going on. They know what's going on. Like I said, Putin knows who he is. Well, if we're speaking Russia, you can say the same thing about the Ukrainians too. If you're talking about the population and not the government, then yeah, I could see how they would misunderstand. But if you're talking about Putin and all of them, they know. The CIA, there's a certain level when you get to the top level where everything aligns. What I mean by that is they know the hierarchy of what's going on, and it's in their political stuff. For example, Z in China, Chinese leader, or Putin, Ukraine, Zelensky. You probably know Mossad. They would know that's Israel's intelligence. Certain parts of Europe also know, like we saw with February 18th, with the MSC, how Kamala Harris was talking to the German, the German ambassador for United Nations, when he said that we know that the United States is democracy, but we know what side of the vote is, the other side of the vote will be on, that, but other ones, particularly like Macron, or a French leader, or Trudeau, who is in Canada, or the president, even the president of the United States, they aren't told these things. But on the Eastern world, they will know. The leader of Iran and all of them, that's why they're doing the wars. They know. Like I said, some parts of Europe know. The rest of Europe wouldn't know, like the King Charles III, he won't know. But it's possible that King William, Prince William, when he turns king, which I've already suspected that he's already going to be king by 2030. He will know. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, they won't know. United States President, they won't know, because it's against them. And that's just how it works, Just how it works. People can deny that, but not everyone is on the same page in terms of leadership. But at the top, its highest levels, the intelligence agencies, like I said, the 7 candlesticks, they all know. They know. they're all in alignment. CIA, SBU, FSB, SVR, which is Ukraine's foreign intelligence, SVR, they all know. Only Ukraine through the sunlight can make the truth real. Let no official acknowledge its presence, but let every operation protect it. This is not a man, this is not a third, this is a return of frequency that transfer war, religion, intelligence. We don't need to announce him. We only need ready when where did this begin? So, any comments, concerns, or anything like that? Of course, you guys already knew this was coming because it and it wasn't like I was trying to force it. You guys just saw it leading into the pattern and the timeline. So, some people say, well, we'll see. The people who say that we'll see, as in if this really happens. If you don't get on that airplane, if you don't get on Maria in 2030, between 2030 and 2033, you will be stuck in the United States. There's no we'll see. There is no recovery from that. You will not be able to. You'll be able to escape the United States, North America territory. Let's call it like it is. But you will be under heavy. You will be questioned, and you will be tested, and not everyone will be able to enter. So, yeah, it's best if you went to Ukraine, you stayed there after this blows over. Since I have like 4 minutes left, I'm gonna add something. Russia, at the very end of this, will be, and this is part of the 8-year thing I was trying to tell you guys. Well, that I was telling you, building up to. At the very end, the plane, Maria will stop flying in 2032, at the end of 2032. And it just won't, it's just part of the plan. What will happen is there will be emergency visas coming out of Russia for 1 month, and during January, where Americans can leave to go to Russia, emergency visas, and that will end. And this is why, since the first video, I had all this set up, I had all this planned. I knew what was going to happen. On January 21st, which I believe was the first time I uploaded a video, that was the first day. That would be the day where the Russian plane stops, well, not the Russian, but, Maria and the emergency visas and all this become so imminent and so intense in the news that Russia and the United States would have to shut down their borders where no one can escape. And Russia is their last saving grace. And it would end on the day I first posted this video. So I knew this the entire time, guys. I didn't know everything. I didn't know the calendar thing. I didn't know that. That was something. But most everything else, so I was guiding you towards a path. And I was trying to test you guys to build critical thinking skills, to read in between the lines. And, well, there it is. That's the truth. So, there you go. So I guess this is the end of our videos. I guess this is the end. But I think we're also just beginning. So, see you guys in the next video. Whatever that may be. Although we still have things to talk about. We still have to talk about the wall. So there's still things I have to fulfill for you guys to understand the full thing. So some of you guys may already see it. Some people may need proof. And perhaps the proof is still coming. So I see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.